Hey guys, this week we're going to be talking about equivalent fractions. I wish that I was at school to be able to teach you this because it would be a lot easier if I could see you and if we had fraction bars and we were in class together, but I can't. So I'm going to do my best to teach you from here. I want you to have your fraction bars with you and have a piece of paper and a pencil. Like last week, I want you to kind of work through this with me just like we were in class together. So first thing we're going to talk about is what are equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are fractions that represent the same value. They take up the same amount of space, but they're represented with a different amount of pieces. Equivalent fractions can have more pieces than another fraction. They can have less pieces than another fraction, but the fractions represent the same amount. So the first one I'm going to show you is going to be circles. And then from here on out, we're basically going to use bars because they're easier to draw. Something that you are going to have to practice to be able to do equivalent fractions well is called partitioning. And partitioning just means that you're able to draw a shape, and I'm going to draw a rectangle just because that's what your fraction bars are, and that you can separate that into as many equal pieces as you need. So if I gave you this shape and I said I want you to make fourths out of it, you would be able to make 4 equal pieces like this, half, 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 and not 1, 2, 3, 4. So partitioning means that you are able to take a shape and you can make pretty equal pieces out of it. And when you're doing equivalent fractions, it's really important that you're able to do that for any amount of pieces needed. You're going to notice that your fraction bars, if you'll get them out and line them up, I know they're a jumbled mess right now, but if you'll get them out and line them up, they're supposed to look like this. I'm going to do the best that I can as a drawing. One whole is at the top, and then after one whole, you go to halves, and then you go thirds, then you go fourths, then you go fifths, then you go sixths. There are no sevenths. There are sevenths in fractions, but in the fraction bars, there are not. You're going to go eighths. There are not ninths. You're going to go tenths. There are no elevenths, and then you're going to go twelfths. So your fraction bars should go in order down just like that, and you put them all together and line them up, and it makes this big rectangle of fraction bars, and that's going to help you be able to pull out the ones that you need easily today. If you don't put them in this rectangle, at least put them in piles, like put all your halves together, put all your thirds together, all your fifths together. Some of your sets might be missing a couple of pieces, and that's fine. Don't freak out about that. It's okay. Some of you might even have a couple extra pieces, especially if you have the sets from last year that we quickly put away and just hurried and tried to throw them into bags the best that we could. So if you have more or less pieces than you're supposed to, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But you need, before we start, you need to get all of your similar pieces together. So you can pause the video right now if you need to, and I want you to go either put them in the big rectangle or go put them in piles so that they're all together. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start. I'm just going to show you one, and I'm going to do the basic circle, basic pizza. Just like with adding and subtracting fractions like we did last week, and I talked to you about it's important that we're talking about the same size whole. It's the same thing here with equivalent fractions. To be able to find fractions that are equivalent, we have to be talking about the same size whole. You can't be talking about one circle that's this big and then one circle that's this big and say this half is equal to this half. That doesn't work. So let's say that you and your family all went to Pizza Hut and you all got personal pan pizzas, and pretend that those 4 circles are about the same size. So you all have a pizza that's the same size. Let's say that your mom decides that she's going to cut hers into 2 pieces. You decide you're going to cut yours into 4 pieces. Your sibling decides to cut theirs into 6 pieces. And your dad decides to cut his into 8 pieces. Okay? So we have a fraction that shows halves. We have a fraction that shows fourths. We have a fraction that shows sixths. We have a fraction that shows eighths. So let's say that all of you ate half of your pizza. Here's half, 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 and half. All of you ate the same amount of pizza, but all of you are showing a different fraction. And that's exactly what equivalent fractions are. It just means that you're showing the same amount, but you're showing it with a different amount of pieces. So 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4, and 2/4 is the same thing as 3/6, and 3/6 is the same thing as 4/8, and I could keep going. 5/10, and 6/12, and 7/14. It's important that, especially with halves, I want you to be able to tell me what half would be for any denominator, because in the next few weeks when we start comparing fractions, we will compare fractions by using 1/2, and it's really important that you're able to know what half of something is. So if I said 28, what would be half? Well, half of 28 is 14. I want you to be able to tell me what halfway is for any fraction that I give you. And that just means splitting an amount so that it's equal on both sides. 14 plus 14 is 28. One other thing that you need to know with equivalent fractions is that when a fraction is shown in the fewest amount of pieces possible, we call that 2 things. Let me try to erase this. We call it 2 things. So if I'm looking at this, the picture that I drew here, 1/2 shows this in the fewest amount of pieces. This is called simplest form, or lowest terms. So anytime in math that you see someone ask you for simplest form of the fraction or the lowest term, sometimes you'll even hear it called reduced fraction. What that means is they want you to show it in the fewest amount of pieces possible. So if I'm showing halves of any fraction, the fewest amount of pieces is always going to be 1 out of 2. I can show that same fraction with 4 out of 8, but that's more pieces. So again, when you show a fraction with the fewest amount of pieces possible, that's called simplest form or lowest terms, or sometimes it's even called a reduced fraction. And you're going to need that for your assignment. There's a couple of questions where I ask you to give me the simplest form of a fraction. That's what I mean when I say that. All right. Let me look at my notes here. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to give you a fraction, and then I want you to pull it out and show it to me. And then I'm going to ask you to find an equivalent using your fraction bars. I want you to line them up, make sure they're equal to each other, and I want you to have those. And then I want you to be thinking about, did I make an equivalent fraction that had more pieces, or did I make an equivalent fraction that had less pieces? All right, so number 1, the first one that we're going to do is 3/4. So with your fraction bars, I want you to go right now and I want you to show me 3/4. And I'm going to draw that out to the side. So 3/4 means that you want 3 of those 1/4 pieces. Okay? 3/4. All right. So now I want you to pause the video and I want you to use your fraction bars, and I want you to try to find a fraction that's equivalent to 3/4. And if you can find one pretty easily, I want you to see if you can find two or three. I want you to see how many equivalent fractions that you can find using your fraction bars, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Pause the video now. Okay, so with your fraction bars, I don't have fraction bars, I wish I did, but I can think of two equivalent fractions that you could have found with 3/4. So the first one that you could have found would have been 6/8. Okay, I'm going to draw that out, and I want us to look at it, and I want us to see if we notice anything about 6/8. So if you used your fraction bars, this is what your model should have looked like. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to the fact that every 1/4 was equal to how many eighths? How many eighths did it take to equal a fourth? It took 2. So for every 1/4, I replaced it. Basically, I cut that 1/4 in half and made 2/8 out of every 1/4. So is 6/8 more pieces or less pieces than 3/4? It's more pieces, okay? 6 is more pieces than 3. So 6/8 is more pieces than 3/4. Another equivalent fraction that you might have found was 9/12. Okay, 9/12. Now, with the 12ths, your picture or your fraction bars would have looked like this. And for every 1/4, it took 3/12 to equal that same amount. Okay, if you didn't get that one, I want you to look at it. So for every 1/4, it took 3/12 to equal that same amount. So I want you to see how I am drawing my model here and how I'm partitioning. Do you see that I can still see the 1/4 lines on both of my models? I'm keeping everything lined up, all of the 1/2s. Well, it's not really 1/2, but all of the fractions, the big size is all the same. It doesn't go out past the 1/4, it doesn't go before it. They're all equal to each other. And then I'm showing how each fourth was broken apart differently. So in this one, in 6/8, I broke every fourth into 2 pieces. In 9/12, I broke every piece into 3 pieces. Okay? So is 9/12 more pieces or less pieces than 3/4? It's more pieces than 3/4. With 3/4, there was not a fraction that was less pieces that you could find. And that's because 3/4 is lowest terms. It's the fewest amount of pieces that you can possibly make this amount out of. Okay, there's not, you can't make 3/4 out of any less pieces than 3. Okay, hope that one made sense. Let's move on and try another one. This time, I want you to pull out 4/12. 4/12. I'm going to draw it best that I can. 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, and 4/12. Okay, so 4/12 looks like this. I think for you it's little black pieces. Some of you might have pink, not sure. So I want you to pause the video now, and I want you to try to find as many equivalent fractions as you can with 4/12. All right, Here we go. So with 4/12, I'm trying to think because I didn't work this one out. I know that, so when you're doing 12ths, we can't, with our fraction bars, make one that's more pieces because there aren't any smaller pieces than 12ths. So we can't do more pieces. So that means that we have to do less pieces. And when we're doing less pieces, that means that we're taking pieces and we're putting them together in groups. So I know I'm going to go ahead and draw the rest of the 12 because I think that will help us. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so I know that if I take 2 of those 12s and I put them together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I took 2 pieces, 2 of the 12s, and I combined them together to make one piece. And I did that all the way across, okay? So I don't have 12ths anymore. I have combined pieces, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I have made 6 out of that. I hope that makes sense. So in the last problem, remember we had 1/4 and I was saying, okay, I took 1/4 and I cut each of those fourths into 2 pieces and that gave me 8. And then I took that fourth and I cut it into 3 pieces and that gave me 12ths. Now, instead of cutting it into more pieces, I have combined them to make less pieces, okay? So this is an equivalent fraction. So I can see here's 4/12, there's that line. 4/12 is equivalent to having 2 6. Equivalent to having 2 6. Okay? And I did not make more pieces. I combined to make less pieces. So in equivalent fractions, you cut to make more, you combine to make less. So I just combined these pieces together and I made 6. All right, now I see another way that I can combine these pieces together to get even less pieces than what I have. So with 12 pieces total, if I put them in groups of 4, so I'm going to go the opposite way. This time I'm going to go on top so you can see better. If I were to put these 4 pieces together and make one group there, I could put these 4 pieces together and make one group there, and these 4 pieces together to make one group there. So how many groups did I make? I made 3 groups. So that is thirds. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Okay? And I can see here's my line, here's 4/12. How many thirds did it take to make the 4/12? It took 1/3. That's also an equivalent fraction. And both of those fractions have less pieces than 4/12 had. Which one of these fractions would be simplest form or lowest terms? I want you to think for a second. Which one of these fractions? So we have 4/12, we have 2/6, and we have 1/3. Which one of those would represent lowest terms, which means that we're showing the fraction in the fewest amount of pieces possible? Which one of those would be simplest form or lowest terms? 1/3. Ding, ding, ding. So with 1/3, I'm only using one piece to show that fraction, and that's less than using 2 pieces. That's less than using 4 pieces. So this is lowest terms or simplest form, 1/3. I hope this is going well for you guys. I wish I could see your face right now because it would let me know how it was going. All right. This time, I want you to try to find 2 equivalent fractions. one that has more pieces and one that has less pieces. So again, I want you to find two equivalent fractions using your fraction bars. I want one of them to have more pieces, and I want one of them to have less pieces. The fraction is 4/6. I'm going to draw that out over here. I know that 6, here's how I partition. I always think about what would be halfway. So if I'm doing 6, here's the halfway mark, and I know that I would need 3 on each side. So then I look at that and say, how can I cut that into 3 pieces so that they're pretty even? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's 6, and then I need 4 of those. All right, I want you to pause the video, use your fraction bars, try to come up with two equivalent fractions, one that's more pieces, one that's less pieces, and we'll be back in a second. All right, here we go. So it doesn't matter which one you do first, more pieces or less pieces. I think I'll do more pieces because it's usually easier. So with 6, I know that if I take a 6 and I cut each of those pieces in half. So I'm going to draw my 6 here. I know that if I cut each one of these in half, I don't have 6th anymore. Guess what I have? I have 12ths. Okay. So if I take 6 and I cut each one of them in half, that's going to give me 12ths. And here's the amount that I had shaded before. So how many 12ths is that? 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 12ths is equivalent to 4 6. And it has more pieces because it has 8 pieces, where 4 only had 4. Okay. Now I'm going to now I'm going to do less pieces. Okay, so if I'm looking at that picture and I'm trying to think how we can combine it. So the first thing that some of your brains might have been thinking was, ooh, I see a group of 3. Oh, I'm drawing on the wrong thing. Hello. A group of 3 and a group of 3. Okay, so I could do a half and a half. Here's the problem with that. You have part of this one that's shaded, and that doesn't work. So when you're trying to combine groups, it has to be equal groups so that you have the same amount in the groups that are shaded and the same amount in the groups that are not shaded. So halves don't work here. Let me erase this. So I'm trying to look at another way that I can combine these so that they would be equal groups, and I wouldn't have part of a group shaded and part of a group unshaded. Okay, it has to be one or the other. So another way that I see that I could group these would be in groups of 2. Like if I take these two pieces and I combine them into one piece, and then I take these 2 pieces and I combine them into one piece, and then I take these 2 pieces and combine them into one piece. I've made 3 equal groups. 2 of my groups are fully shaded, and then I have one group that's not shaded. So I don't have a group that's half shaded, half not. They've got to be one or the other. So that works if I put 2 pieces in each group. And if I put 2 pieces in each group, that gives me 1, 2, 3 pieces to make a whole. That would be thirds. Okay, thirds. And how many thirds did it take me to equal the 4 6? It took 2 of them. So 2 thirds is equivalent to 4 6, and 8 twelfths is equivalent to 4 6. Okay, 2 thirds is less pieces, 8 twelfths is more pieces. Which one of these fractions would represent lowest terms or simplest form? Take a second, think about it. Which one of these fractions would represent simplest form or lowest terms? I hope you said 2 thirds. Remember, lowest terms or simplest form means how we can show the fraction in the fewest amount of pieces, and 2 pieces is the fewest amount of pieces that I can show this fraction in. So this is lowest terms, okay? All right, here we go. We're going to do a few more. This is all you have to do today is just the video, because this takes a lot of practice. This is something that's really difficult with fractions to learn. Equivalent fractions are not easy. And so today is just the video, and then you can do your assignment on Wednesday and Friday. So the next one I want you to do is 5/5. Okay, I want you to get out 5/5. When you are partitioning into fifths, sometimes that's kind of hard. So here's what I do. I draw my rectangle with only 3 sides, and then I go 1, try to make them the same size, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There we go. 5/5. I want you to take a second. I want you to try to find me an equivalent fraction that has more pieces and an equivalent fraction that has less pieces. Pause the video. Go. All right. So I hope that you saw that with this one, there were lots of options that you could have come up with. If you are looking at your whole rectangle of your fraction bars, so here's the whole big rectangle. It starts at 1 whole, and then it goes 1/2, and then it goes 1/3, and it goes all the way down. Anything that was under fifths, so that would be 6/8, 10ths, and 12ths. Those are all more pieces. Anything that was above fifths, so that's 4ths, 3rds, halves, and then your 1 whole, would be less pieces. So 5/5, if you don't know this already, a fraction that has the same numerator and denominator represents 1 whole, okay? So it takes 5 pieces to make a whole, and we have all 5 pieces to make a whole. So 5/5 was equal to having 1 whole. So you could have had 6/6, 8/8, 10/10, 12/12 would have been more pieces. 4/4, 3/3, 2 halves. Sometimes people try to call halves seconds. We call them halves. Okay, I know it's kind of weird. I know it's kind of weird to say that, but it's halves. And then your 1 whole bar. Okay, all of those are equivalent to each other. So now I want you to take a second and think, out of all the fractions we have listed, which one of those would represent lowest terms or simplest form? I hope you said, remember, lowest terms or simplest form means the fewest amount of pieces. Well, out of all of those that we've talked about, which one of them would be the fewest amount of pieces? Your 1 whole bar would be your fewest amount of pieces because it's only 1 piece, and all of the rest of them are more than that. Okay, great job. Let's do another one. This time let's do 6/8. So I want you to show me 6/8. So with 8s, I draw my rectangle, I cut it in half. I know that with 8s, I'm going to need 4 on each side, so I cut each half in half, and I cut each half in half, and that gives me my 8 pieces. Okay, we need 6 of them. You are probably just pulling out the 6 pieces, and that's fine. I'm showing all 8 just because it's a lot easier to show how they're equivalent if you're drawing your picture, if you actually draw what the whole looks like. Okay, so take a second. I want you to try to find an equivalent fraction that's more pieces, an equivalent fraction that's less pieces. Pause the video. We'll be back in a second. All right. So first thing that I noticed, I know that with 8s, that 4ths are usually equivalent. always equivalent. With an even number, that is. I'm not going to say always. I know that for every 2/8 that we have, that equals 1/4. Okay? So there's 2, there's 2, there's 2, and there's 2. Okay? I said not always because if this were 5/8, let's just pretend for a second. Okay? If this were 5/8, then fourths wouldn't work because I would have one piece that was half shaded, half not shaded, and that doesn't work. Okay? So that's why I said not always. But when you have an even number, fourths always work. So here we go. I took 2 of my 8s, I combined them together to make fourths. So 6/8 is equal to having 1, 2, 3 fourths. That's my equivalent fraction that has less pieces. For the one with more pieces, I found 12ths to be equivalent. How many 12ths did it take to match up to your 8ths? Let's say for every 2/8, how many 12ths did it take to equal that amount? I want you to look at that for a second. So let me say it again. For every 2/8, so here's 1/8, 2/8. For every 2, how many 12ths does it take to equal that? It takes 3. So for every 2/8, there were 3 12ths. So you can see that I am showing you the fourths here, okay? And then for every fourth, for every 2 of those 8s, for every 1/4, I'm making 3 12ths be equal to that. That's how I get those 12 pieces going across. 3, 6, 9, 12. And then I need to shade in all the way to here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 12ths was equal to 6/8. So we have less pieces here. We have more pieces here. So out of those 3 fractions, can you tell me which one would be simplest form or lowest terms? I hope you said 3/4, okay? Because 3/4 is how I can make this fraction with the fewest amount of pieces possible. All right, we're going to do one more like this. Then we're going to draw some of our own that we don't have fraction bars for, and then you'll be ready to do your assignment. Last one is 5/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, well, oop. I lost one. There we go. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so there's 5/10. I want you to take a second, pause the video, see if you can make me an equivalent fraction that has more pieces, an equivalent fraction that has less pieces. And this time, I want you to see, you might find an equivalent fraction with less pieces that's still not simplest form. So I want you to see if you can find simplest form and also find another fraction that's less pieces. Pause the video and go. All right. So if you are making a fraction that has more pieces, I hope you noticed that 5/10 was equal to 1/2. Okay, 5 is half of 10. My dog needs to go outside. Hold on just a minute. Jace, come let Jagger out real quick. So 5/10 is equal to 1/2. The only fraction that we can make that's more pieces would be 12. That's the only fraction bar we have that represents more pieces. Here's the half, and I know that half of 12 is 6. So I know it would take 6 pieces to make a half. 6/12 is the only one that I can make that's more pieces. For less pieces, there are several things you could have had. You could have had 4/8. You could have had 3/6. You could have had 2/4, and you could have had 1/2. Okay. Out of all of those, I hope by now you can quickly see that 1/2 is simplest form or lowest terms, because it only takes one piece there where the rest of them take more than one. So that's going to be less. Sorry, my dog's driving me crazy. That's going to be the lowest term. All right, now we're done with the fraction bars for a minute, and I want to show you really quickly how to draw your own equivalent fractions when you have a fraction that you can't do with your fraction bars. This is where things get a little bit tricky, and this is where your drawing and partitioning is really important. So first one I'm going to show you is 3/9. Okay, so when you're drawing your own, it's important that you draw not just 3 pieces. It's important that you draw all 9 and then you shade in 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if I want to make a fraction with more pieces, this is the easiest one. So anytime that you want to make a fraction with more pieces, you're just going to take each piece and you're going to decide to cut that piece into another number of pieces. So you could say, I'm going to take each piece and cut each piece into 2 pieces. Or I'm going to take each piece and I'm going to cut each piece into 3 pieces. And then you're going to be making an equivalent fraction by cutting that piece into more pieces. So my drawing, I'm going to draw the exact same thing that I have above to start with. Okay, I'm drawing 3/9. Now, the easiest thing to do is let's cut each piece into half. Let's cut each piece into 2 pieces. So you can either do that vertically, like take and cut each one, draw another line up and down, or the easiest thing for me to do is let's draw a line going all the way across and cut them in half that way. Okay, so if I look now at the fraction that I have, instead of having 9 pieces, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now I have 18 pieces, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them shaded. Okay, so I had 3/9. I redrew 3/9, and then I said, how do I want to cut each piece? I want to cut each piece into 2. You could cut each piece into 3. You could cut each piece into 4. You could cut each piece into however many pieces you wanted to. Totally up to you. I just did 2 because it's the easiest. So I cut each piece in half, and that gave me an equivalent fraction, which is 6/18. Okay? Now, making an equivalent fraction that is less pieces is a little more difficult because I can't just cut them into however many pieces that I want to. When I'm making less pieces, I have to combine pieces to make equal groups. Okay, so with 9, I know with 9, if I'm thinking about 9, that I can make groups of 3 out of 9. Okay, now this only works if you make groups of 3 and then remember, all the shaded pieces either have to be in a group or the whole group has to be unshaded, but you can't have pieces that are in both. So if I were to take 3 pieces and combine them into a group, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, okay? That gave me one group that was shaded. So if I were to draw this in rectangles and not arches, I just created thirds, okay? By putting 3 pieces together, I just created thirds. And I would need one of those to be shaded to be equal to the 3/9. So 1/3 is equal to 3/9. That's the hardest part about equivalent fractions. Cutting them up to make more pieces is pretty simple. Combining them to make less pieces is where things get a little bit tricky. So it's going to take a lot of practice. Don't get frustrated. I'm going to do another one with you. Then I'm going to let you try one with me. So the next one I'm going to do is 5/7. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I need 5 of them to be shaded. Okay, so if I want to make a fraction that has more pieces, remember, I'm going to draw the same fraction over again. And then I'm going to decide, how do I want to cut each piece? Do I want to cut each piece into 2 pieces, each piece into 3 pieces, each piece into 4 pieces? Again, cutting it in half is always the easiest thing to do. However, I think I might do 3 pieces just to show you something different. I'm going to take away the shading for a second just to make it easier for you to see. So if I wanted to cut each piece into 3 pieces, okay, I could go this way if I wanted to. I could also go this way if I wanted to, okay? Whatever's easier for you. I think this time, just to be different, I'm going to go vertically. So I'm taking each piece and I'm cutting it into 3 pieces, and drawing 2 lines cuts it into 3 pieces. 1 line, 2 lines, that gives me 1, 2, 3. 1 line, 2 lines gives me 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I took each 7th and I cut each 7th into 3 pieces. So now let's look at what was supposed to be shaded. Everything over here is supposed to be shaded. So let's count how many pieces that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Out of how many total pieces do I have? 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 15 out of 21, okay, would be the equivalent of that. Now, if I was trying to make a fraction with less pieces, okay, so let's look at the fraction and let's see. If we have 7, can I make equal groups here in any way? If I made groups of 2, that would be 2, 2, 2, and then I would have 1. That doesn't work. If I were trying to make groups of 3, 3, 3, and 1 left over, that doesn't work. Groups of 4 doesn't work. Groups of 5 doesn't work. Groups of 6, groups of 7 is what I already have. So 5/7 is the lowest term. It's the simplest form already. My pen isn't working. It's the lowest term. I can't make 5/7 with less pieces than 5, okay, because I can't combine those pieces to make groups. I hope that makes sense. Okay, I want you to do this one with me. Let's do 3/5. So this time, I don't want you to use your fraction bars. Try to do it without them, okay? I want you to draw 3/5 with me. Let's do that together. So you need a pencil and paper. So I'm going to draw 3 sides here, okay? And I'm going to make equal size pieces. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Let's see if I run out of room, I'll just extend it and keep going. 4 and 5, okay? So there's my 5 pieces to make a whole, and I need 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go try to draw a fraction that's equivalent to 3/5. And remember, you do that, first of all, by drawing the same thing underneath it. So I'm drawing 3/5 again. My computer's about to die. Hold on. There we go. I want you to draw 3/5 again underneath it, and then you can use that as your starting point. Remember, you cut it to make more pieces, or you combine to make less pieces. So I want you to pause the video, go see if you can draw a picture that would make an equivalent fraction to this. All right, here we go. So if you tried to make a fraction with less pieces, let's talk about that first. If you're trying to make a fraction with less pieces, that means that you have to combine what you have to make equal groups. Well, out of 5 pieces, I can't make equal groups, okay? I can't make groups of 2, I can't make groups of 3, I can't make groups of 4, and I already have 5. So that means that 3/5 is already in simplest form. Already in simplest form. I can't show this fraction in less pieces than what it already is, okay? But I can make an equivalent fraction that has more pieces, okay? And you can always make a fraction that has more pieces. That's the easy one. So to do that, you just decide, okay, for each fifth, how many pieces do I want to cut each piece into? Do I want to cut each piece into 2 pieces? Do I want to cut each one into 3? Do I want to cut each one into 4? And that's totally up to you. And as long as you cut each piece into the same amount of pieces, then you are making a fraction that's equivalent. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I think I'm going to cut each piece into 4 pieces just to get a fraction that's different than anything that we've had. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm drawing a cross in each one and cutting each piece into 4 pieces. And then all 3 of these pieces were highlighted. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. There's 20 pieces total. So I'm talking about 20ths. And 4, 8, there are 12 of them shaded. So 12 20ths is equal to 3/5. If you decided to cut each piece into 2 pieces, you got 6/10 for your answer. If you decided to cut each piece into 3 pieces, you got 9/15 for your answer. Okay? And I would assume that those are probably the 2 that you guys did the most. Okay? So any of those are correct. They're all equivalent fractions and they all are made up of more pieces. Remember, you're just taking each piece that you have and you're cutting it into more pieces, and that's what gives you the equivalent. Okay. Let's do one more, and then we're done for today. One more. 12/16. So let's draw this out. Going to need quite a bit of room for 16, so I want you to draw this with me. That's going to be, I know that halfway is going to be 8. And then half of half, that's going to be 4 on each one. Half of that's going to be 2 on each one. And then separate those in half. So there's my 16 pieces. And I need 12 of them. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, 12, 16. So pause the video. I want you to see if you can make a fraction. I'm going to let you do whatever you want this time. You can do a fraction that has more pieces. You can do a fraction that has less pieces. Pause the video and go. All right, here we go. So the easiest thing to do is to cut it into more pieces. If you take each of these pieces and you cut each of them in half, I'm not going to do it because that's a whole lot of drawing again. But if you were to take and you were to cut each one of them in half, I'll do it on the picture. How about that? Okay. There were 16 pieces. If I cut each one of them and made 2 out of each piece, that would be 32 pieces. And if 12 of them were shaded and I cut that and made it 2 pieces each, that would be 24. Okay. So I figure a lot of you probably did that. I'm going to take a second and do a couple of fractions that you could do with less pieces, because that seems to be what's harder. Okay, so if we have 16 pieces total, I'm thinking about groups that I can make out of 16. Okay, groups that I can make out of 16. I know that with 16, I can make groups of 4. So I'm going to try that But remember, I have to make sure that every group is either completely shaded or completely not shaded. I can't have one piece that's missing, okay? So if I do groups of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? That worked. I have 3 groups that are completely shaded and 1 group that is not. So I just took those 16ths and I made fourths out of them. And how many of the fourths are shaded? 3 of them are shaded, okay? So 3/4 would be equal to that. I also know that with 16ths, I can do groups of 2 because 16ths is an even number. So I'm going to go do groups of 2, and I'm going to check my groups to make sure either the group is either completely shaded or completely not. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, that worked because these groups are completely shaded while these 2 groups aren't shaded at all. So what did I just create? It just took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces to make the whole, and there are 6 of them fully shaded. So 6/8 is equal to 12/16. Okay, this takes a lot of practice. Don't get frustrated. It's really hard to do equivalent fractions that have less pieces when you really have to look at those groups and see how you can combine them. But drawing your models is going to be the best thing, okay? I really want you to work on partitioning, meaning draw that fraction bar and practice drawing those lines so that you have equal pieces. Okay, that's really important when you're doing equivalent fractions. So this video is all you have to do today. On Wednesday, you're going to do half of the assignment that I'm putting in Google Classroom. It's 5 questions. Okay, the whole thing's 10 questions. So you're going to do 5 questions on Wednesday, and you're going to do the other 5 questions on Friday. Let me know if you need help. Hope it goes okay.